He was once the smoothest man on television. He had it all: fast cars, flashy suits, and every woman in Hollywood wanted to be by his side. Don Johnson owned the 80s. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling will shock you. How does a man go from primetime royalty to nearly becoming homeless? One minute he was pulling in huge amounts per episode, and the next he was making desperate deals just to survive. Behind the scenes, Don was living through one of the most heartbreaking realities. But how did he lose it all? And at 75, how's he coping? Once you hear everything he's been through, you'll never look at him the same again. Before we talk about his downfall, you need to understand just how big Don Johnson was. Back in the 1980s, if you were searching for a style icon, it would be impossible not to think about Don Johnson in Miami Vice. He was famous for his white suits, pastel shirts, and no socks. He basically invented the look. By the late 80s, Don was making millions per year. He had hit television shows, chart-topping songs, and movie deals. He was rich, famous, and on top of the world. Don owned multiple luxurious properties, including a massive ranch in Colorado, a mansion in Hollywood, and a luxury pad in Miami. His car collection had only the big names: Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Porsches. The company he kept told you he was on another level. Jack Nicholson, Barbra Streisand, Melanie Griffith, and even a young Leonardo DiCaprio, who eventually dated his daughter, Dakota Johnson. Life looked perfect until things came crashing down. Before the yachts, pastel suits, and million-dollar paychecks, Don Johnson's life looked nothing like a movie star's. Donnie Wayne Johnson was born on December 15, 1949, in Flat Creek, Missouri, a tiny town in the middle of America. His mom was just 16 when he was born, and his dad was only 19. Kids raising a kid while struggling to make ends meet. Money was tight, and life was rough. When Don was still young, his family moved to Wichita, Kansas, where he grew up. His family was working class, sometimes barely getting by. There were no acting classes, no silver spoon, and no Hollywood connections. Don revealed that both his parents were frequently absent and always stressed. He once said, "I had the quintessential maltreatment, and parents who divorced when I was 12 years old, and I was the oldest. I really was unhappy, and I left home at 16. But even with all the challenges, Don had that spark, the rebel charm you can't teach. In high school, he was a wild one, getting into trouble, good-looking, cocky, and full of energy. He wanted more than small-town chaos. Don insists that being born into poverty served as motivation. He once said, "I had a lot of challenges when I was young, not physically, but emotionally and psychologically. But I only later discovered that's what lights the fire in creativity." It all started in high school, when he joined the drama program for extra credits. His teacher saw something special, casting him as Tony in West Side Story. Don caught the acting bug immediately. He said, "The moment I stood on stage, it was a drug. The audience was showing me love, which more than made up for the stuff I didn't get at home." After graduating, he enrolled at the University of Kansas on a partial scholarship, majoring in drama. He eventually switched to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, a place that trained some of the industry's best. In the late 60s and early 70s, Don landed small roles in theater and indie films. One of his earliest was the post-apocalyptic cult classic A Boy and His Dog, which put him on the map, even if just slightly. Through most of the 70s, Don bounced around Hollywood, picking up low-budget film roles and television guest spots. He dealt with constant auditions, rejections, and second guesses. Then in 1984, after more than a decade of being almost famous, Don got his big break, landing the role of Detective Sonny Crockett on a new crime show called Miami Vice. No one expected it to blow up, but it became a cultural phenomenon. Don wasn't just playing a cop, he became a fashion icon, a heartthrob, and a symbol of cool. The slick suits, fast cars, and pet alligator made Miami Vice redefine what television looked like. Suddenly, Don was everywhere. Magazine covers, music videos, talk shows. He began earning thousands per episode, and with 5 seasons of success, he went from hustling for roles to buying mansions. Don didn't stop at acting. In 1986, he released a pop-rock album called Heartbeat, and it took off. The title track became a hit, landing him on the Billboard charts. He performed live concerts and recorded duets with Barbra Streisand. Was he the best singer? Probably not. But at that point, Don Johnson could do anything and people would love it. By the end of the 80s, Don had it all: a hit show, a booming music career, millions of dollars, and a glamorous lifestyle. His rise wasn't just impressive, it was the kind of Hollywood fairy tale people dream about. But the higher the rise, the harder the fall. And for Don, the heartbreaking fall was coming fast. When it comes to romance, Don didn't just date, he made headlines. We're talking Hollywood's most famous women, whirlwind weddings, breakups, reconciliations, and a love story that gave us a movie star daughter. Don has been married about 5 times to 4 different women. 2 of those marriages were so short they were annulled within days. The internet barely knows the identity of those 2 women, though Don revealed one was a dancer while the other was a rich bimbo. Things got real when he met Melanie Griffith on the set of the 1973 film The Harad Experiment. Their relationship raised eyebrows even back then, but they were inseparable. By the time Melanie turned 18, they were engaged, married in January 1976, separated by July, and divorced by November, all in a matter of months. It was passionate, messy, and totally Hollywood. But here's the twist. They got back together over a decade later, proving they had something special. In 1989, they remarried, welcoming their daughter, Dakota Johnson, who would become a huge star herself. However, by 1996, it was over again. Melanie later said, "He's no angel. He is not easy." Don revealed that although they'd gone separate ways twice, the love was strong. Some people are just meant to be together. I don't believe that if you love someone, that love dies. They remained close, co-parenting Dakota, and occasionally appearing together, publicly supporting their famous daughter. Don also dated Barbra Streisand in the late 80s, a full-blown Hollywood power couple. He had a long-time relationship with model and actress Patty D'Arbanville, with whom he had a son, Jesse Johnson, now also an actor. There were rumored flings with Uma Thurman and a highly controversial relationship with Jodie Lynn O'Keefe, his co-star on Nash Bridges, who played his daughter. She was 18 while he was in his late 40s, sparking massive media backlash. But after all the wild breakups and makeups, Don shocked everyone in 1999 when he finally settled down for real. He married Kelly Flager, a former preschool teacher and socialite from San Francisco. She had a totally different vibe from the flashy Hollywood types. Kelly was 27 and Don was 49, but despite the age gap, their marriage worked. They've been together for over 2 decades with no scandals, just a quiet, steady love life. Together, they have 3 children, and Don often credits Kelly with grounding him. But before she came into the picture, Don was living an extremely wild life that ruined him and caused his biggest losses. When someone rises as fast and as high as Don Johnson did, there's usually a dark side lurking behind the glamour. Behind the scenes, Don was fighting demons that nearly destroyed everything he'd built. After Miami Vice exploded, Don was one of the most famous men on the planet. He could get anything he wanted. But with that lifestyle came the negative side of Hollywood fame. Don began partying nonstop. In the 80s, the party scene wasn't just casual drinks. It came with all kinds of illicit substances. Hollywood was flooded with temptation, and Don didn't hold back. He later admitted he was introduced to these vices through Hollywood pressure. "When I was a young man in Hollywood, illicit substances and partying were everywhere. It doesn't become a problem immediately. It takes time, and it led to some poor choices." The booze became his escape, a way to deal with the anxiety, fame, loneliness, and constant expectations. But it always starts as fun and ends in chaos. The drinking and partying started affecting everything: his career, his relationships, even his health. By the early 1990s, the cracks were showing. Sure, Don was still famous, even starting the successful series Nash Bridges. But there were rumors of mood swings and erratic behavior, including a highly publicized incident where he hurled insults and threats at morning radio hosts while intoxicated. He eventually checked into rehab. Later, he admitted he'd reached a point where he couldn't hide it anymore. The drinking had taken over, and he knew if he didn't stop, he'd lose everything: his family, his career, maybe his life. It was a hard wake-up call. But nothing could prepare Don for the financial hurdles ahead. By 2002, Don Johnson was no longer the flashy heartthrob he once was, but he was still famous and still flying private jets. Then, suddenly, Don was all over the news again, not for a new role or red carpet event, but for something so disturbing it's still considered one of the most bizarre moments in his career. In November 2002, Don was flying through Europe, landing at the German-Swiss border. Customs officers did a routine luggage check and found something extremely unusual in his briefcase: financial documents connected to bank accounts supposedly worth over $8 billion. These were sensitive high-level financial records, investment paperwork, and documents tied to large international transfers. Officers detained Don for questioning and launched an investigation into possible money laundering. A spokesperson for the German Customs Investigation Department told reporters, "There's a reasonable suspicion that Mr. Johnson was working for others. If everything is legal, you don't have to transport documents worth this amount in a car." Tabloids floated theories that Don was part of a high-stakes financial conspiracy. Others said he might have been duped, unknowingly carrying documents for shady businessmen. Don immediately made it clear he had no idea about any wrongdoing. According to him, he was just traveling with business associates, and the documents were part of a film financing deal. He insisted nothing illegal had happened. Thankfully, after digging into it, German investigators agreed, clearing him of criminal activity and dropping the case weeks later. No charges, no arrest, just a whole lot of confusion. But the scandal still stuck. The headlines were brutal. People began asking, was Don secretly broke? Was he getting involved in risky side hustles? The negative publicity led to Don losing deals, marking the beginning of more financial troubles. Even after surviving the wild money laundering scandal and clearing his name, Don's money problems didn't go away. By the early 2000s, the glamour had faded and acting jobs were slowing. But Don continued spending like the money would never run out: multiple homes, luxury cars, expensive divorces, child support, and the cost of just being Don Johnson. He started investing in things he didn't fully understand. Those poor choices started adding up. His financial foundation began crumbling. It was a classic celebrity downfall: rich on the outside, totally broke underneath. His biggest blow came when he almost lost his gorgeous multi-million-dollar home in Aspen, Colorado. This wasn't just a house. It was a 10,000 square foot mountain paradise in one of America's most expensive zip codes. In 2004, Don defaulted on a $930,000 loan, and the bank began threatening to seize the house. They were literally hours away from foreclosure. He was saved at the last minute when some mysterious financial backing came through. To this day, it's not fully clear how he pulled it off. Some say a mysterious investor, others believe wealthy friends. A few claim he sold personal assets like art, jewelry, or cars. Either way, he narrowly avoided total disaster. But the damage was done. The world now knew Don Johnson was in real financial trouble. He owed millions to multiple creditors, including a hospital, a liquor store, and a law firm. In 2008, Don sued production company Risher Entertainment for $23 million, claiming they owed him unpaid profits from Nash Bridges. He argued the show had earned over $1 billion in syndication and distribution deals, and he wanted his rightful cut. It was a messy, drawn-out legal battle. But Don won. A jury awarded him $23.2 million, a financial lifeline thrown right as he was sinking. But that money didn't erase his reputation for being reckless with cash. By the time Don hit his early 60s, whispers around Hollywood said he was done. Studios weren't calling. The offers dried up. Aging in Hollywood can be brutal, especially for someone who built their career on being the attractive leading man. But just when it looked like he'd hit rock bottom, Don surprised everyone. He didn't give up. He didn't vanish. Instead, he slowly made his way back into the spotlight, not as a heartthrob, but as the wise, cool older guy who had lived through it all. He bagged roles in shows like Eastbound and Down, appeared in movies, and in 2024, starred in the Netflix original film Rebel Ridge, which introduced him to a new generation of fans. In 2025, he joined the cast of Ryan Murphy's latest series, further cementing his late career resurgence. Now, At 75, Don Johnson is a survivor. He's not the reckless party boy he once was, or the broke star begging banks to save his home. He's a man who's been through addiction, scandals, lawsuits, and financial ruin, and still found a way to stand tall. He's proud of being sober. He's close with his kids. He's embraced the ups and downs of his journey. Looking back, his downfall began when he started living a lifestyle his income couldn't support. He had the mansions and the glitz, but no solid plan, no rainy day fund, no long-term wealth management, just fame-fueled spending and blind trust in the wrong people. Once the big check stopped rolling in, it all caught up. But he may have lost millions and made a mess of things. Yet Don Johnson is still here. And guess what? He's cooler than ever.